Hello, welcome to the channel. I'm Tom and I make electronic music under the name Bamboo Leaves. If you're new to this channel, I make videos where I break down various electronic music sounds and genres to help you learn about track composition and sound design. If that sounds like something you're interested in, consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel for future tutorials. In today's video, we're going to break down the minimal micro house track that you heard on the introduction. I think you'll find the layering and texture building techniques covered in this piece helpful for many different applications in electronic music. With that said, let's jump into it. So to me, the micro minimal house sound is about trying to get a sparse sound using quite a lot of different percussion and drum sounds to subtly build up a groove. So it sounds minimal and sparse, but there's actually quite a lot going on. So if you look at the screen, these purple tracks here, these are all drum tracks that have either kicks, claps, or percussion, and it makes up, 13 of the 16 tracks that I've got on this whole piece. So it's a really drum-focused genre, in my opinion. Another big part of it is having a high attention to the sample choice. So you need these sort of quick and snappy samples that come pre-compressed, so they sound quite aggressive from the get-go, and they'll eventually be quite loud in your mix, and they give that more modern house genre vibe to it. Because, samples like this, they have quite a lot of processing on them. You don't have to do too much in the mix. Eventually, when you come down to a full mixing stage, you're probably going to want to add in your own compression and EQ to sculpt it to how you want it to sound. And something I'll go over is just the percussion sounds aren't always the same, just looping over and over again. The listener thinks that they've got it in their head, how the groove's going, and then you'll kind of shift it up a little bit and it'll kind of keep them interested. So let's listen to this first half of the track. Start with the kick, track number 1. I've dragged a kick sample into a sampler. I wanted to modify the decay of the sample, so I have dragged it in over here and I've actually brought in this kick, and so I've just made it a bit snappier by bringing it in here. That's more aggressive with it. So that's probably where I landed. I've actually only got a high pass filter on this one to cut out a lot of the kick low end so that it sounds a little bit more sparse in the first half, and when it drops I have this second kick and it's just doing the same thing. However, that big kick has nothing on it, so the full amount of the sub is coming through, and I'm pretty happy with the sound. And that goes down to sample choice. I've got this quite subby, hard, aggressive kick that sounded pretty good straight out of the box. The only interesting thing, if you notice, is a 4-4-4-4-4, but then I have this kind of 1-2-3 sound, so it's kind of like a do 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 a do do do, just kind of keeps it driving. Next we have this clap. I haven't done too much processing on there. I've just dragged it into the quick sampler. I've faded out that decay a lot more so it was snappier. There you go, bring it in. I'd say that that's one of the important parts of micro house, minimal house, is having these tight sounds. So that's like a tight clap. So it's really snappy and aggressive. It doesn't have too much of a tail, not much reverb on that. And just for this one, I've got a high pass filter, quite aggressive, because I wanted to clean up that low end so that the other instruments that have more of a focus on that could come through in the low end. Next up, we have this clap 2. This is a different clap sample. So if I compare that to the clap 1, so it's like a ghost clap. So the first clap's more of like a drum machine clap, synthesized sound, like an 808, whereas this one is more of like a sample of someone clapping. I purposefully have had it quite low in the mix because I want it to give a bit more of a rhythm. So that's where this kind of ghost clap, so it's like big claps, small clap, big clap. It gives a bit more of a swing to it. I've also taken the filter down. So I've actually got the filter enabled. I've taken it down a little bit and I've pushed the resonance. So let's try and listen without it. Or with it. Sounds like a bit more dead. I've taken that top end off. It's a little bit more squelchy. Next we have this topper loop. So this is one of the crucial parts to the percussion. I'll play it with the kick and you can kind of see where it fits into the track. So that's how it sounds on its own. It's kind of giving that washy, flangy kind of weird sound to it. It's quite low in the mix and it's meant to just add some atmosphere. For that, I have taken some loop that was in the Apple loops. What's it called? Dub hat topper. Listen to that. On the processing is I've added a aggressive high pass filter and then rolled off the absolute top end, so it's a bit more band pass but still in the high register. So without it, enable it. Sounds thinner. Next I have this tape delay. So that's actually acting as a delay. So it's just adding a few more notes in there. So the hi-hats are playing and the delay is adding in some hi-hats on the 1/4 note. It's kind of, you know, delaying it and it's adding more groove to that. Enabled. An interesting thing about this tape delay, I've covered it in a different video. I'll link it for you to hear it, but you can emulate some how a track would sound if you'd recorded it onto tape, and there's a few of the sort of the artifacts that you get along with tape. In order to do that, I've done a clip threshold. I've changed these modulation parameters. I've made sure that the dry signal is down to 0 and the wet signal, so all of those effects are being applied to everything you can hear. Next, I have the flanger. So I've added just a Logic flanger on top of that. That is adding a bit more of an interesting texture to this top percussion sound. Enabled. And you can see the parameters that I've set for that. So that was just to add a bit more atmosphere. I've actually got a bus 1 and 2. These are both reverbs. One of them's a 4-second Valhalla reverb decay, and the other one is a 0.84 second. So I've got a couple of different reverbs on there. So right, here's where we get into the crux of the minimal house sound, where we have these different interesting bits of percussion, shakers, hand drums, toms, things like that. I've got a drum fill in there. And it's just kind of building up the groove of this track and keeping it interesting. I'll play the kick with all of the percussion. So it's kind of got these dum 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 chicka da chicka boom boom. That mixed with the clap and the topper gives you the sound. It sounds simple, but there's a lot going on. First track on this kind of percussion set is some claves or something hitting together. So let me just zoom in on a bar and you can kind of see how it's positioned on the grid. If you're interested and you want to replicate this exact groove, I made sure to put things, you know, just before kind of kicks or claps happen. So it's like dun 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 dun. Next, I've got this hand drum, just a dun, just thrown onto one of those syncopated beats to build up this groove. I've got this low tom. I got this from an 808 sample library. So these 3 toms, you've got the low, mid and high from an 808 pack. Just solo all those 3 because they have a similar sonic sound. I actually included that low one as a bit more of like a ghost kick as well. So it happens just before the kick. If I solo the tom and the kick, you'll hear how it kind of is like a ghost kick before the next one comes in. As I kind of said, I've got these 2 other toms. I've got the mid and high. It's basically just the mid pitch and a higher pitch one, and it's panned. The final kind of bit of percussion that I've got on this first section is this drum fill. This was something, again, that I searched in the loop section of just Logic's loop, just a drum fill. It sounds like this. And I have added an EQ on there to kind of boost that high mid and take out lots of low end. So listen to it now. There you go. So it's just a bit thinner sounding, and it's just another one of these things to keep it interesting. And I made sure that it was positioned so much that it lined up with all of the bits on the grid. Let's listen to a section where all of those drums are playing at once. And that's the drum section really for the first half completely built up. Okay, next we have the, we actually get onto a bit of a musical instrument sound. I've got this sub bass. So the sub bass is purely sine wave. So it's the quick sampler preloaded with the default patch, which is just a sample of a sine wave. And I've just put some notes really low so it goes into the sub register. You'll only be able to hear it with headphones or a sub speaker of some sort. It's quite quiet and it's meant to complement the drums, so I've tried to make sure that it doesn't happen too many times on the beat. It does on this single one, so that's where you'll get a kick and this sub playing at the same time, so they'll be competing for sub frequencies a little bit. So I've tried to push most of them off onto an off beat so that it's not competing with the kick. So I'll sample a kick and this sub together, and you can kind of maybe hear what I'm talking about there. It also helps with the kick that I took out the sub frequencies for this first part, so that I actually made a bit of room for this sub bass that does happen in this first section here. No other processing on that at all actually. If I was kind of going into doing a final mix, I'd probably put some compression and some EQ on there, but you know, it sounds pretty good without any processing at all. The next section is kind of where it drops, you know, as you'd have a bit more of a drop, a few more instruments are coming in. Just before that, I have this drum fill that I showed you before. The kick stops at the top half, you know, the kick's going all the way, and just before, on the last part of the bar, it comes out, so it kind of clears a bit of space, the drum fill comes in, and then it drops. With a drop like that, make sure that you're taking some things out just before it comes in, so that when it does eventually drop, it has a bit more of an impact because more things are playing and it feels louder, it feels more energetic. I'll play now this second half, which is the drop. I have this big kick that comes in now, and that's where the sub frequencies I have stopped high passing the kick, and I've let the lower end come in, and it's louder and it has more sub frequencies and it helps with that drop. I've also brought in this shaker that's just on the offbeat with the kick. A high pass on there, cutting out those low frequencies, and then I have actually bussed that a little bit to the reverb, so that's what you can hear it there. And that kind of higher frequency bit of percussion has the driving energy. On top of that, I've also got this hi-hat. For this, I actually took the drum fill from before. You can see the waveform of these two bits. I just chopped that second half, put it here, and just looped it over. So with the hi-hat one, I've gone a bit further up with the high pass, so I'm taking out some more of the low ends. It helps that at the same time, the shaker also hits on the same time as that hi-hat. Next, we're moving on to this analog bass. So this is Logic's retro synth. I've basically got this sawtooth wave on this oscillator here. It's mostly that sound. There's a square wave up there, but the mix is mostly towards this sawtooth wave. You can see the semitones, I've pulled it down by an octave, so it's lower entering the bass frequencies, whereas the top oscillator is still in like an octave higher effectively. I've got this filter enabled, and the filter envelope, it has an attack and decay that it kind of opens up quickly and closes quickly, so it's like the boom boom boom. And also that's the same thing with the amp envelope as well. I've got the flanger on there activated apparently. It won't be doing too much. If I take off the extra processing, we can kind of hear how it sounds on its own. the analog bass sound. You can copy the parameters on there if you wanted to. On the settings down here, I have made sure that the stereo spread is actually quite high, so you can kind of hear that it's a bit wide. Initially I had it all the way down to 0, which makes it go down the middle. So that's just there. I didn't have much on the wide parts of the stereo field, so I thought actually it sounded quite good out there. Normally it's not great practice to have a bass sound that's too wide, because you have the low sub frequencies out wide. It kind of feels a bit disorientating. To kind of counteract that, I've got this EQ where I'm taking out a lot of those sub frequencies. I didn't think I was missing them, so I was happy letting the kick ring through with the sub, and this bass was from this 100 hertz or something upwards, and that's where I've boosted those to kind of give them the bass, not the sub bass emphasis. I've also added an overdrive on there, so it's just driving the sound, making it a bit more gritty, a bit more driven. Let's just listen with those. The last one, which is it's a bit more unique in terms of the processing, I've got this transient master. So it's a transient shaper. This is not a stock plugin. This is something that Native Instruments have created. It just lets you emphasize or de-emphasize parts of the transient. So you can basically make the attack sound more aggressive, or you can make the sustain stay there longer, or you can have a blend of them each. So I wanted to make it a bit more plucky, and I wanted to take out the sustain, so I wanted it to be tighter. I'll play it without, and then I'll enable it and see if you can hear if it tightens up that sound a little bit. Enabled. The last bit of instrumentation I've got on there is this deep bloops synth that I've called it, in the context of the other parts of the music. I have just 2 doubles, so it's like glum glum. So the glum glum. I like using the sine waves on the quick sampler. I feel like you can modulate them and do things with it to make it not sound like a sine wave, and I quite like doing that with my music. So here again, I've used the sine waves. I've made the amp envelope quite tight, so otherwise it would sound a bit more like this. Now bring it in, sounds like this. The tight, punchy, minimal house sound. On top of that, I have driven it. So if I actually took off the rest of the processing on there, you would hear that it sounds cleaner. I've added a high pass filter and a reverb on there. So let's listen to those now. Creating a bit more space, and it looks like I've got a compressor on there. That will be just to rein in the frequencies, make it a bit flatter, and then bring up the whole level. Okay, let's just listen to that last section with everything played together so that you can hear those individual parts. Great stuff. Thank you for watching to the end of this video. Let me know if you have any questions about any of that in the comments, and I'll answer them as they come in. If you got anything from this video, please consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel for more tutorials. Until the next one, I'll catch you later.